So a judge just ordered Donald Trump to return to court to be schooled on what he's not permitted to say and what he's not permitted to do. Let's talk about it, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, Judge Juan Merchan, the judge presiding over Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York, just issued an order essentially directing defendant Trump to sit his butt down and be schooled on the prohibitions that Judge Merchan put in place to control Trump's dangerousness. So Trump knows and understands exactly what he's not permitted to say and what he's not permitted to do. No, you can't make this stuff up. First of all, here's the new reporting from the Associated Press. Headline: Trump to get schooled on rules after district attorney worries he'll use evidence to slam witnesses. And that article begins: Donald Trump was ordered Thursday to appear by video at a May 23rd hearing in his Manhattan criminal case after a judge this week set rules barring him from using evidence in the case to attack witnesses. Judge Juan Manuel Merchan scheduled the hybrid hearing, the former president on a TV screen, his lawyers and prosecutors in court, to go over the restrictions with Trump and to make clear that he risks being held in contempt if he violates them. The case is continuing in state court, even as Trump's lawyers seek to have it moved to federal court. U.S. District Judge Alvin Hellerstein, who is considering the transfer request, issued an order this week setting paperwork deadlines and a hearing for late June. Merchan, still in charge while that drama plays out, agreed to instruct Trump on the rules by video rather than in person after a prosecutor reminded him last week that bringing Trump to court would present mammoth security and logistical challenges. Trump's April 4th arraignment, where he pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records, attracted a crush of media and protesters, involved multiple street closures, extra security screenings, and shut down non-Trump court business for an afternoon. Quote, "We'll set up the camera for Mr. Trump to appear wherever he is at the time, and we'll do it here in the courtroom virtually," Judge Merchan said. Merchan issued what's known as a protective order on Monday, days after a hearing where he urged Trump's lawyers and prosecutors from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to reach a compromise regarding the Republicans' access to and use of evidence turned over by prosecutors prior to trial. That kind of evidence sharing, called discovery, is routine in criminal cases and is intended to help ensure a fair trial. Prosecutors sought the order soon after Trump's arrest, citing what they say is his history of making harassing, embarrassing, and threatening statements about people he's tangled with in legal disputes. Merchan added Trump's virtual hearing to the court calendar a day after Trump appeared on a CNN forum and offered up a barrage of falsehoods, excuses, and insults on a variety of topics, including what he deemed the fake charge of his criminal case. Well, first of all, friends, I'm glad Judge Merchan is treating defendant Trump like the dangerous, petulant, untrustworthy person he is. And what is it that Judge Merchan is really trying to accomplish by setting this hearing, by sitting Trump down and, giving him a little tutorial, a schooling, a good talking to about what he is and is not permitted to say, permitted to do? Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but let's first review briefly the protective order that Judge Merchan issued in this case. What he did was he essentially took the evidence and he batched it into 3 categories, and then he set different rules for defendant Trump, depending on which category we're talking about. So the first category of evidence, Judge Merchan said, defendant Trump, you can look at it, you can review it, but you can't disclose it, you can't disseminate it, you can't post it on social media or anywhere else. Regarding category 2, you can look at it, defendant Trump, but only in the presence of your defense attorneys. Somebody has to be sitting there with you, supervising you, looking over your shoulder, babysitting you, because you can't be trusted to look at it yourself. And then there's category 3, my favorite category. Category 3 involves some of the evidence that was extracted from the cell phones of witnesses in the case. Regarding this third category, Judge Merchan said, defendant Trump, you can't even look at it. That's how untrustworthy you are. That's how dangerous and reckless you are. You can't even look at category 3. Now, the judge did build in a little bit of an escape hatch for Donald Trump's defense attorneys. He told them, okay, if there's something in there that you think Donald Trump really needs to see, you can come back to me. You can seek permission, and I'll decide whether it's something defendant Trump should or should not be allowed to see. So what is Judge Merchan really trying to accomplish here? First of all, there is no hope. There is no expectation that this will alter Donald Trump's behavior, right? When he violates the protective order, not if he violates the protective order, but when he violates it, the fact that Judge Merchan set this hearing will sit Donald Trump down, will school him, will tell him line for line and word for word what he's allowed to say and do and what he is prohibited from saying and from doing. When Donald Trump violates the protective order, Judge Merchan will have everything he needs to hold him in contempt. Because think about it, if Judge Merchan just issued this written order and relied on Donald Trump's defense attorneys to inform him about the ins and outs of the protective order, what would be the first thing Donald Trump would argue when he violated the order? My attorneys didn't tell me. I couldn't say that. Maybe I misunderstood the order. Maybe they misunderstood the order or misinformed me. Yeah, well, that possible defense is being taken away by Judge Merchan because he's going to sit Donald Trump down and school him like the dangerous child he is. And it is really important that Judge Merchan do everything necessary to set Donald Trump up to be held in contempt when he violates the protective order. And we all know why. Because justice matters. And friends, as always, thank you for tuning in to these daily Justice Matters videos. As you may know, we are an all-volunteer operation here at Justice Matters. We are cranking out a legal analysis video every day, 7 days a week, and we couldn't do it without your support. So if you would like to more formally support our all-volunteer efforts, our mission, our content, please feel free to come on over to patreon.com. You can sign up to become a patron, and if you do, I will send you some Team Justice and Justice Matters stickers and a personal handwritten note of thanks. And friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again soon.
They have no souls. Now, look, in fairness, Donald Trump did not say that. Maybe he doesn't believe it. I don't know. I do know that the National Security Advisor Donald Trump hired said it, and the place where people paid money to hear Trump's ex-NSA say that, the left has no soul, was a Trump property. Oh, and Trump reportedly wants to put that person back in government with him if he's reelected. Rolling Stone reports, quote, the former president has privately noted on several occasions over the past several months how he's seriously considering names like Flynn and Jeffrey Clark for high-level positions in a potential second White House term. That's according to two sources with direct knowledge of the matter, as well as another person briefed on it. The two worked hard to overturn the election, with Flynn lobbying the president to institute martial law, end quote. That's Michael Flynn. He had to be pardoned by Trump after he had lied to the FBI about his Russia contacts. He went on to try and overturn the election results, and he's not alone. The Reawaken America tour is a who's who of election deniers and insurrectionist sympathizers. Eric Trump, his wife Lara Trump, Roger Stone, the foam pillow salesman, Sidney Powell, Peter Navarro. As my colleague Rachel Maddow reported on Monday, that lineup previously included two virulent anti-Semites. Now, they've since been booted from the tour, or at least the stop at the Republican presidential frontrunners resort in Florida, but no credit is due for that because you shouldn't actually have to disinvite Hitler fans from your event. Now, look, illiberalism, conspiracy theories, racism, anti-Semitism, they've all been around forever. They're not modern inventions. They're not even uniquely American inventions. What is different in modern America is that there's this weird overlap going on. Extremists can be armed. They can now obtain very deadly weapons very easily. 1 year ago, a white supremacist murdered 10 black people at a Buffalo supermarket because they were black people, using an AR-15. 6 days ago, a Nazi worshiper killed 8 people at a shopping mall in Allen, Texas, with an AR-15. Our next guest, Professor Cynthia Miller-Idriss, studies American extremism, and yesterday she had this exchange with Marjorie Taylor Greene at a House Homeland Security Committee hearing.
Would you consider Trump supporters extremists?
We are worried about violent extremism, so that to the extent, not about what people believe, but to the extent that they are moving toward violence.
Trump supporters specifically.
If they're calling for violence, it doesn't matter to me who they support.
Haven't seen any. By the way, there's a great rally in Iowa this weekend if you want to study people on the right and what they believe.
Joining us now, Cynthia Miller-Idriss, public affairs professor at American University, director of the Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab at American University. She's the author of Hate in the Homeland, the New Global Far Right. Also with us, Ryan Busse, former firearms executive at one of the country's top gun manufacturers. He's a senior advisor to Giffords, an organization fighting for gun safety led by the former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. He's also the author of Gunfight, My Battle Against the Industry That Radicalized America. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here this evening. Professor Miller, let me just start with you. Can you just unpack for us this idea of violent extremism? Because I think what the Congresswoman is trying to get you to do is overlap that with Trump supporters. That's not necessarily the case. It is something we're worried about, but that's not your point. Is if people turn to violent extremism, that's your concern, and that people are doing that in increasing numbers in America.
Absolutely. I mean, right now we have also record-breaking circulation of propaganda. I mean, so what you said at the beginning, of course, that's true that these are age-old conspiracies and hateful ideas, but we also are seeing in the online context record-breaking surges, record-breaking reports of white supremacist propaganda. We've had a 357% increase in domestic terrorism investigations by the FBI. I mean, in every measure we have available, we're seeing increases in a wide variety of violent extremism. And so when you see people move to a sense of us versus them, in which the other poses an existential threat, that's where we see the call for violence, and that's what's really dangerous.
And Ryan, that's age-old as well, right? Everywhere in the world that we've seen extremism flourish, we've seen the othering of people, the dehumanizing of whatever the other side. There is an issue in America, and the prevailing issue right now is that there are a lot of people armed. There are a lot of guns, and no matter what you say the reason is for the shooting, the thing that they all have in common and that we don't have in common with other developed nations is the number of guns.
Yeah, absolutely, Ali. You know, and Cynthia's absolutely right. When you reduce things down to an all or nothing, us or them, existential battle, you're going to have a radicalized populace. And frankly, a lot of this was started by groups like the NRA and the firearms industry that basically have reduced very complex policy battles down to this simple all or nothing, black or white. And you tell people, right, that their culture is under threat, that it's an existential battle. And now they're armed to the teeth. We have 415 million guns in the United States, and extremists can buy that, radicalized people can buy those very, very simply. We have about 267 million vehicles in the United States, so 150 million more guns than vehicles, and we have way too many radicalized extremists, as Cynthia mentioned.
Ryan, you and I have talked about this before. I read all the gun publications and magazines. I'm a business reporter, so I understand the business side of it. But it became an imperative for the industry, right? Unless you can get everybody to fear all the things that could possibly happen to you, you're not going. You'll stop people at buying one gun or no guns. Why did it happen? What was the connection between selling guns and radicalizing people?
Well, the NRA figured out that if you can motivate people with irrational fear, conspiracy theory, and an existential battle, that you can make them vote in very irrational ways. And right in 2016, we saw a lot of people vote in what we think are irrational ways. The problem is those exact same things sell guns. They're very effective at selling guns. So consider that before our first black president led in the polls in 2007, Barack Obama, the industry had never produced more than about 6.5 or 7 million guns in a single year. In the worst year we can remember, the most radicalized, fearful, conspiracy-laden year any of us can remember, 2020, there were 23 million guns sold in the United States, right? So radicalization, hatred, and fear are the same things that those things drive political outcomes, and they drive gun sales.
So, Cynthia, it should be very easy to denounce radicalism and extremism and violent extremism, but apparently it's not, because Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama had this exchange with my colleague Julie Sirkin. Let's listen to this for a second.
Sir, if there are folks with white nationalist beliefs, of which there are in this country, unfortunately, do you believe they should be serving in the military?
We got to define that first. What is a white nationalist?
Someone who propagates Nazism, someone who doesn't believe that black and brown people are equal as white people.
You think a white nationalist is a Nazi?
Well, that is one of their beliefs.
Well, I don't look at it like that.
How do you look at it?
I look at a white nationalist as a Trump Republican. That's what we're called all the time, a mega person. That's what
Do you agree with that assumption?
Yeah, I agree that we should not be characterizing Trump supporters as white nationalists.
Cynthia, where I come from, they call that a layup, right? Julie gave him a couple of opportunities to say, oh, wait, hold on, we're confusing things. I'm a Trump supporter. I'm a MAGA person. I'm not a white nationalist. He didn't walk away from it. And I'm just puzzled in 2023 that it's a hard thing to do, and it seemed to be a hard thing to do for Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, to just say, we don't like white nationalism. We don't like extremism. We certainly don't like violent extremism. The blurriness gets confusing to me.
Yeah, I mean, part of what's happening here is that you have this reactionary tendency of people to say, you're labeling us, right? So Republicans or especially MAGA Republicans will say, you're labeling us extremists, and this is just some sort of leftist plot. It becomes a conspiracy theory in and of itself. We heard that on Tucker Carlson, like this is a plot, this is a conspiracy to label things, to that this is not actually true, it's a hoax. And so there's this narrative going on that people are out here labeling at the same time as there's propaganda circulating, telling everybody not just there's an existential threat that you have to fight against, but that something's being stolen from you, your Second Amendment rights, your white majority country, your election. And so then you're called upon to fight to save that thing heroically, to save democracy, to restore your rights, to defend your rights, to defend your nation and your white race. And so it's this mix of emotional cues while saying these people are just labeling you, and it's not true, right? So it's a whole mix of propaganda and persuasive tactics that are really, really effective.
Ryan, one thing that we don't have in common with the rest of the world is we don't have these repeated mass shootings. Most Western countries have had a few incidents of them, and it almost always results in some sort of action being taken. In the United Kingdom, basically banning all handguns. In Australia, I think it was a buyback program. Both Australia and Great Britain were done under conservative governments. It's not in the rest of the world a left-right issue.
Yeah, no, it's really not, but it is here, right? This extremism, and especially armed extremism, sadly and dangerously, is really the central totem of much of the Republican Party. I mean, Tommy Tuberville as much as said it, right? I mean, and so if you wonder why we can't get anything done, the analogy I often use is, I think, like for instance, background checks poll at 85%, just an incremental improvement, but we can't do anything about that. And why is that? It's as if there's a beam in the Republican House and there's asbestos flaking off of it, right? And 85% of it, people say, well, that's bad. That might cause cancer. We should do something about it. And then the rest of the people say, hold it. If you pull that beam out, our whole house comes down. In other words, the entire Republican GOP mantra, right, their totem is guns and gun radicalization. And so it's very difficult for it to be pulled out of the home.
Cynthia, is there a solution to this? Because between the gun issue and the tacit support of or refusal to condemn violent extremism, it kind of feels like a dead end. What's the answer to this? Ryan just talked about background checks polling at about 85%. Most Americans don't support white nationalism either. Like, they would like just normal government.
Yeah, I mean, there is some good news, which is, I run a research lab. We test a lot of different strategies to help people recognize manipulative content online, persuasive tactics. And it turns out that people really don't like to find out they're being manipulated. And when they find that out, they reject the propaganda that goes along with the manipulative tactics, the persuasive rhetoric and the narratives and the stories that are trying to get them to believe something that's not in their own interest. The problem is that works really well, statistically well, to prevent people from believing it. It's much harder to de-radicalize people and to get them to stop believing it once they already do. And so, we're in a situation now where the genie's out of the bottle, and we need some kind of, really significant de-radicalization, de-escalation, and that is very hard to do, especially when you already have, over 400 million guns out there. So we're in a really difficult situation.
I used to think, though, that was a thing you did sort of individually to people, right? When we talk about terrorists and lone wolf terrorists, I didn't realize entire chunks of society are going to have to be de-radicalized. Thanks to both of you for the work that you do, Cynthia Miller Idriss and Ryan Busse. We appreciate your time. Coming up, some Republicans don't want you to vote, and they're implementing new laws that are supported by billionaire-backed advocacy groups to suppress your vote. We're going to discuss Republican efforts to discourage voting next with Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett.
What do we always say?
Let's quote, so far this year, 18 bills in 10 states have been signed into law that will add new restrictions to voting or election administration, according to an analysis of data maintained by the Voting Rights Lab. During the same period in 2021, the tally was 16 restrictive bills in 11 states, also according to the Voting Rights Lab. Now, Republicans have been at this game for a while, but after receiving widespread criticism and protests in the past, they're refining their tactics in an attempt to draw a little less public scrutiny. The Times report continues, quote, behind the efforts is a network of billionaire-backed advocacy groups that has formed a new hub of election advocacy within the Republican Party, rallying state activists, drafting model legislation, and setting priorities. The groups have largely dropped the push for expansive laws, shifting instead to a strategy that one leader describes as